Welcome to the Elephant Room, where we tackle the unspoken, uncomfortable, and unseen truth. Join Linda Carmouche, your host, a licensed therapist, mental wellness strategist, and speaker, going beyond titles, addressing the emotional scars, hidden trauma, fears, and the silent battles many professionals face but rarely discuss. Come on in. The Elephant Room, where vulnerability meets strength. Hit subscribe and connect with hope, healing, and the courage to address the elephant in the room. Remember, the content here is for informational purposes only. Seek help from a qualified professional for mental health concerns, and discretion is advised for sensitive topics.
Hello, what is up, good people?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Ebony.
Yes. Okay, yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Hey, maybe I was muted.
I think
Okay.
so because I could see your lips moving.
Okay. Well, I did an amazing spiel that I'm going to have to go back over because apparently, maybe I'm not getting chats in the chat box. So I don't really know what's going on with that tonight, but we're not going to allow that to stop the conversation. What I said before Ebony came on, and apparently the mic was muted, is this is a conversation that we usually don't have. But tonight, we're going to uncover the secrets to suicide. There we go. There we go. All right, here we go. Let me tell you, it's something about certain conversations we're trying to have in the elephant room where this mic starts acting silly. But we are still going to have this conversation.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get it started. Ebony, most of the time when you hear people talk about suicide, there is embarrassment, there is shame, there is guilt. A lot of the times in certain communities, we're not even talking about it, surely not educating people about it. I did not introduce you using your bio because I would like you to tell the people who you are and what you do.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for your platform and thank you for the work that you are doing in the community and for bringing this conversation to people because, like you said, a lot of people don't talk about it. It is very taboo, but it's necessary. We
Yeah.
have to create space and opportunity to talk about this. So thank you. I'm Ebony. I am a person on a journey of healing and discovery. I am currently pursuing my master's of social work degree online, and I hope with my education and my lived experience as a multiple suicide attempt survivor, I also live with multiple mental health diagnoses, that I can use those things, the intersection of identifying as a Black woman, identifying as a Black woman of faith, a sister, a niece. I hope to use all of these pieces and parts of me and my lived experience to help people, to help create conversations around topics that are taboo, that are really hard and challenging, but bringing those parts of me, bringing the professional, the educational to conversations, to places where we can have conversations to help educate people and to help bring awareness, so that way people are getting the help that they need, that we're addressing stigmas, and that we're challenging a lot of the misconceptions that exist out there that prevent people from getting the help that they need.
That's good. You said a whole lot, and I want to make sure that the audience is hearing all of this goodness. Tell me, break it down to the least common denominator. If we have a teenager listening and they've heard of suicide, they may know some people at their school that are survivors. Can you tell me what you mean by multiple attempt survivor?
Yes, that is an amazing question. And it's important when we're having discussions like this that we're intentional about the language that we use. So, for example, I will not say somebody committed suicide, because that word committed has a negative connotation to it, such as somebody committed a crime. So we say somebody died by suicide. So just for example. And so what I mean by a multiple suicide attempt survivor is an individual such as myself who has gone through experiencing suicide attempts and have lived through it. And so that is what I mean by a multiple suicide attempt survivor. I have experienced more than one suicide attempt and am still alive.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. And it's
You're
important.
welcome.
Sometimes we don't embrace the conversation because we don't know what to say. I listened to an amazing video that you were featured in today. And I want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned. One of the things is you said you want to make sure that you help to educate um, minority communities. Most of the times, we don't believe suicide is a part of our community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, as I said, I identify as a Black woman. So, if anything, I am a living example, real live in the flesh, that suicide impacts Black women. And statistically, it shows that minorities have increased rates of deaths by suicide and struggle with suicidal ideations and attempts. So it is happening in our communities, but because of cultural influences, whether it be, from a Hispanic, Asian American, Latino, Latinx, Black African American, because of how we're brought up, topics like suicide are so taboo that we don't talk about it, because of culturally what we were taught and to perceive and to think about them, and then taking it even a step further, bringing in a faith or spiritual component. For me, that was another reason why it was really hard to talk about or admit I was struggling with suicidal ideation and even my attempts, because of what I was taught from a faith based perspective, my Black faith based experience, and what how I was taught to view suicide and death by suicide and things like that. And so we have to start recognizing that our community, our youth, men, women, adults, our communities are struggling with this. People are hurting and people need help. And when we don't talk about these things, we make it difficult for people who are struggling to feel like they're not alone. Because what happens when you're in a dark room, right? Like, you can't see anything. But if you were to turn on the flashlight, that light, everything the light touches in that dark room is going to be shown. And
Oof.
so I like to use that example because when we keep things in the dark, when we don't talk about them, it's hard to see. You can't navigate your way through it. People feel alone. But when we turn on the light, there's no darkness. And so we invite people in to what can be difficult to talk about, what can be hard and challenging and uncomfortable. But the more times we have platforms like this, spaces and opportunities, psychologically safe spaces for people to share that they're struggling and that they're hurting, we create space, we create room, we help give people permission to say, this is something I struggled with too. This is part of my lived experience. This is something I'm trying to navigate, whether it's a lost survivor, meaning someone who's lost someone by suicide and they're learning how to navigate life without their loved one, or someone such as myself who has had attempts and survived, or someone who just struggles with suicidal ideation, which is just having thoughts of suicide and death, right? And so being able to create spaces and opportunities and safe spaces and being safe people, because that's important too for people when they're struggling and when they need help, to be able to admit that. I think this is where this needs to start specifically for our populations, racial ethnic populations.
Whoo! Ebony, you came on in the elephant room. Talk to me in the chat box. How y'all feeling out there? This is so good. Okay, I got to back all the way up. I got to back up because we got to unpack some of this. You ended with not only creating a safe space for people, but you have to be a safe person. When that person is hurting, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to tell you they are struggling. If they feel like you're going to judge them, if they feel like you're going to look down on them, if they feel like you're going to damn them to hell, they're not going to open up and say, I'm struggling. And then you used an analogy of being in a dark room with no light. When you're in a dark room, there are all kinds of things that go through your mind. The boogie bears get real in the dark room.
Yes.
But you, in your analogy, you said when people are able to open up, it's like turning on the light or turning on a flashlight, and maybe they can begin to see that there are other options, that there is hope, that there is something for me to live for. And so when we create these safe spaces and we are safe people, we become a healing balm for that person who is hurting. You also said a lot of the times people feel alone in that space. And that's not a good feeling when you're struggling. I want to make sure that we point out you don't have to be in school. You don't have to be educated. You don't have to have a degree of any kind. You don't have to be in the pulpit of the church. Every single person listening to us can be a hand stretched out to a person who is struggling. Because once it's done and that person is gone, it's too late. We have to begin to do something now. This is so
Yes.
good. This is so good, Ebony. This is so good. We all have a job to fulfill because people are hurting. And I'm glad you said you are the example that it can happen to anybody in any culture. Suicide doesn't discriminate, doesn't care how much money you have. It can hit one of us. It could be anybody at any time. So don't ever get to the place where we say won't ever happen to me. We don't know, because life happens.
Yes,
Life happens.
yes.
What are some of the myths do you think people have about suicide?
What the point that you just ended on, it doesn't happen to us. I grew up hearing that's a white people's issue. Black people don't kill themselves. Um, we, I think another, and this has to deal with stigma too, but even in families where there has been a loved one that's died by suicide, I think creating having trouble admitting that. Like I kind of consider that too, because we'll want to say, oh, it was something else, but
Yes.
we don't want to call that thing what it is.
Yes.
So I, consider that too, not being honest about what really happened. And so um myths surrounding spirituality and faith, just what we're taught, how we're taught from that perspective, how to perceive suicide and dealing with suicidal ideations, or even people who may be well meaning and well intentioned in their approach. And I think from that perspective, there are some myths that perpetuate further stigma around it and make it harder for people to get help. And then I
Can I
think
can I
even
can I
myths.
jump in and say one of the
Oh,
things that,
absolutely.
if someone comes to you and says, "I'm having suicidal thoughts," and we say, "I'ma pray for you," it's not enough, y'all. It's not enough. There's a place for prayer, and yes, we want to pray. However, we need more than prayer.
Yes.
We need more than prayer. Ebony, you mentioned that how we're taught about suicide impacts how we see it. I'm going to take it a step further and say, when we don't talk about it, when we don't educate about it, when we don't know the signs to look for, one of the dangers of hiding the fact that a loved one has died by suicide is that, as a clinician or therapist, one of the things we look for when we're evaluating a person in their suicide is, have you had a loved one who has died by suicide? Because that increases your chances. So when you
Yes.
hide that information, you're putting yourself in a position of danger, especially if there's a child or children and they don't know the truth. When they go in to be assessed by a therapist for suicidal ideations, and the therapist doesn't know because they don't know, you might
Yes.
be putting them in further danger. So we have to be honest about it. There is no shame or embarrassment. It's the truth.
No, absolutely. And something I learned recently through the CDC is when organizations like that, foundations, are collecting data, because being able to, show data and numbers attached to topics like mental health and suicide helps with getting information, funding for research, and things like that. The coroner's office, if an individual has died by suicide and the family does not want that cause of death to be added on the death certificate, that that is an option.
Oh, wow.
And so when I saw that, my mind automatically went to, I believe that's rooted in stigma and fear.
Yeah.
And this is like meso, macro, micro issues right around that. But, talking from a systems perspective, right? Because of the stigma around suicide, the lack of education, training, and awareness, I also learned even with like health insurance, that can impact you being able to, I'm sorry, life insurance coverage. That can impact that as well if you've had a suicide attempt or if you've had a death by suicide. So on a systems level, things like that further perpetuate stigma and fear around it as well. And so, to your point, we have to approach this issue from many levels, but you're right. When we don't talk about these things, when we're not truthful about them, and I want to honor and validate, it's not easy to talk about it. But the more we do, we can do hard things. And
Yeah.
when we do it afraid, when we do the hard things, it's like building weight, right? At first you may start off lifting 3 pounds and then that muscle memory starts kicking in, right? And then maybe you can go to 5 pounds and 10 pounds. And so I say that to say the more that we talk about it, the more that we share experiences, the more that we have this knowledge, the more that we start to identify ways within our community, in
Yeah.
our works, in systems, the way stigma exists, we can start addressing it and start advocating for change.
And church.
And church, yes. We cannot forget about
We
that.
have to have the conversations. And you're so right. We can do hard things. We can do hard things. One of the listeners said they wouldn't have thought that it would be legal to choose if suicide could be or not be on the death certificate. I didn't know that either. So that's an
Yeah,
interesting find.
I'm pretty sure, like, depending on where live. So I'm always going to say, do your own research and defer to where you live, the county. But I did read some information and see that there have been instances because that's information that is used for research, that not having that accurate
Hmm.
um, death
Hmm.
by suicide impacts numbers. And so if a person really did die by suicide, but it wasn't put on that that was the cause of death for, whatever reasons, that's not accurately reflecting the numbers, which
Yeah.
make it challenging to accurately get that information. So,
And I'm sure it impacts whether you can get life insurance benefits or not. I'm sure.
yes,
Because there
I dealt with that as I was trying to navigate that myself because I was I had suicide attempts in the past. That was a question that was asked and a factor in being able to get benefits.
wow. Wow. Tonight we are having the hard conversations. Ebony, I'm so excited that you are here. There's so much stigma around mental health, mental illness, and suicide, but we have to have these conversations. When we talk about the stigma surrounding mental illness, a lot of the times because that person hasn't been able to have the conversation about the mental health challenges, it can ultimately lead to the pain increasing, them feeling alone, them feeling hopeless, and then the suicidal ideations come forth. So when we begin to open the door, not only to talk about suicide, but also to talk about mental health, and it's okay if you're mentally having some challenges and you need help. It's healthy
Yes,
to get help. You mentioned earlier that you have multiple diagnoses. When you um, found out and began to embrace it, do you feel that that was also a challenge for you?
yes. It was very challenging for me navigating it because, going back to like we said earlier, as a black woman growing up in the black church, you depressed, that didn't go together. That was like in conflict. And it definitely was not something that
Mm-mm.
you admitted to out loud. Kind of
Mhm.
like what goes on in this house stays in this house. It was like that. And so for me, I did struggle with that. I did struggle with trying to bring those pieces that I was experiencing that were very real and tangible, but trying to reconcile that those parts of me because I was told that's not something I'm supposed to deal with or struggle with. And so it took a lot of years. It took a lot of years in therapy. It took a lot of years of giving myself grace. It took a lot of years of unlearning and having to relearn what life could look like for me. It took redefining what being successful could look like for me. It took being able to embrace those parts of me and learn from them because without those, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. Without those experiences, I wouldn't have been in positions to help children in after school programs that I worked with or children in schools. I've had the opportunity to go into churches and share my story. I've had the opportunity to facilitate QPR, which is the suicide intervention training. It stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. Without those parts of me and that lived experience, it would not have gotten me to where I am. It didn't always feel good, but it was necessary, and I'm
Yeah,
learning more and more every day to find the meaning and purpose in it.
that's good. That's good. And talking about meaning and purpose, I know that today you had an opportunity to visit the Capitol and you're out
Yes,
there
I
right
did.
now, even though you're taking time to speak with us tonight, you are in DC making impact. And so thank you for continuing to hit the pavement to bring voice to those topics that are not being talked about. If there were a mom or dad who has had a child who has struggled with thoughts of suicide and that parent doesn't understand, I've even heard parents say, I'm going to beat it out you. What would you say to that parent to help them better understand their children? What education, what could you share with them?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking that because as a child who dealt with family, specifically parents who didn't understand, um, it was hard as a child having your parent not understand what you were going through and wanting them to. And so as a parent, I would say to do whatever you can to educate yourself on what it is that your child is struggling with. In this case, we're talking about suicide and suicidal ideation. So whether that looks like going to the counselor at your child's school and asking the counselor for information, whether it's going to maybe your primary care doctor's office or like Psychology Today, you can Google, put in specific things like I want a Black male therapist who is faith based. Um, whatever ways, whatever means you need to educate yourself as best as possible on how to support your child. But ultimately, sitting down and having that conversation with your child is going to be the most effective thing because yes, while it is great to have therapists, counselors to guide us in what that can look like, I think it's also very important when we are people supporting individuals who are struggling, just sitting down and asking them, how can I support you? And you're doing more listening than you are talking because at that point you want to be there to show up fully for that person. And I understand it can be hard, especially if you're hearing things that your child may be saying. It can be hard, but at that point, it's about you showing up and being present for them and giving them space to be honest about what it is that they're struggling with, letting them know that you love them. And it's okay for you not to understand what they're going through, but saying, I may not understand, but I'm still here for you. I will walk through this with you. I will sit in this darkness with you and we'll navigate it together. And then I will say sometimes, especially when, depending on your background, for me, I never knew what help looked like. I learned in therapy. My therapist asked me, she was like, Ebony, if someone were to ask you right now, how could they help you and support you, what would you tell them? And I sat there for a minute because I didn't know. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the thought process to articulate if somebody wanted to be there to support me, what would that conversation look like? And so I think that's another component to this too, is being able to identify because there are people out there who want to support us. So maybe it's, let's go back to the parent child example, coming up with a code word, or like a first aid kit, right? First aid kits are there for if you physically get a cut or something. Let's think about mental health or suicide first aid kits, creating that with your child. So let's say if your child has anxiety, right? And what that anxiety can look like for them. Create a first aid kit of, if they come home just saying pop, and pop is, I need 5 or 10 minutes to myself. Okay, if you don't come back 5 or 10 minutes, I'm gonna come check on you, right? Just doing different things, being able to articulate if you have a child that is struggling with suicidal ideation, because there's a difference between if a person is feeling suicidal and they have a plan, and then if they have the means to carry out that plan, like that can look different too. And so being specific and understanding those specifics and what it looks like for your child is part of that necessary conversation too, that definitely the counselor or like a therapist or something can also help you work through and navigate. But I would just really say, and as a caregiver, having that support for you too. So whether that is you debriefing with a therapist or somebody, right? But then also just being honest and having that conversation with your child and getting it from them, what support looks like for them to you, and really being able to cater that to, and it might change, and being open to that as well. So just sitting down and having that conversation with them.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And you gave some very practical tips on things that they can do. And the only thing that I would add is making sure you protect whatever your child has shared with you. Don't get on the phone and say, "Oh, did you know little Johnny told me, and that's the craziest thing I ever heard." Because everything you worked on when you sat there and you built that safe space, you have now burned it completely down. Protect. And I'm not saying you have to be in there alone. There's a safe space for you also. That's why Ebony said, get you some support, but make sure that you
Yes,
protect what that child has told you and it doesn't become the next hot topic between you and all your girlfriends. Okay? Because we're literally talking about you helping your child to make some decisions that's going to keep them safe and healthy.
yes.
That's
And
good.
I think I'll just add on to that too. I think it's setting the precedence for kids to, when they're struggling, to go to someone and say that they're struggling instead of feeling like that's something that they can't do, whether it's with suicide or whatever, because we all struggle, right? And
Mhm.
so as a youth, starting that foundation with them, that it is okay to go to someone when I'm struggling or when I'm hurting or when I'm not okay. This is normal and it is okay. And that is something that I have permission and that I'm worthy of doing and that I'm worthy of getting that support and help.
That's good. I also want to say that the practical tips that you shared for parents helping a child will also work for an adult to an adult.
Yes,
If you have a loved one, you can transfer those same recommendations that Ebony gave. You can say, I don't understand this, but I'm here for you, sis. I'm here for you, brother. Honey, I'm here for you. Whomever it is, you can still share, have a first aid kit. That's your safety plan. That's how we're going to check in. Also, don't minimize. I have seen it where a loved one is struggling with suicidal ideations or mental health concerns, and a parent or a loved one will say something like, all you got to do is go to school and come home. You don't even have real problems. We talked about it last week or the week before. We don't know what that other person has gone through. Allow them to feel what they are feeling, because whether we create a safe space or not, it's their truth, it's their reality. The same with
Yes,
depression. I've heard a loved one say, depressed? What are you depressed about? We don't want to minimize what somebody else is feeling, okay? We have to do a better job of just being open. And we too have to be vulnerable and say, I don't understand it, but I'm willing to be here with you and learn
yes.
along the way.
And it's okay to say you don't understand or you don't know. Like that is okay. And
Yes,
I think also about, going back to the spiritual aspect, just saying, well, I'm just going to pray for you. Well, thank you for the prayer, but also what is another tangible way that looks?
yes,
Offering to sit with that person. Maybe it's a mom and she's dealing with postpartum, depression, or, research shows postpartum, there can be suicidal ideation connected with that
yes,
too. Maybe offering to cook for her for the next couple of days, maybe offering to help do the laundry for her. What, like, tangible ways you can support
yes,
someone that's struggling? But faith without works is dead. So you're right. Like earlier, you said, yes, we can pray, and prayer is powerful. But what are the works? What are the tangible actions to go along with that
yes,
prayer is what we need to.
yes, yes. I love that. I love that. We have to make sure that we check in with ourselves, because sometimes we're not having these hard conversations because it's going to wake up something in me.
Yes,
So I'm avoiding it in you, and I don't want to support. One of the things I've heard family members say over the years is, I don't know what to say. Sometimes it's not what to say. Sometimes you just have to sit there and say, I'm here. I'm here.
yes.
Tell me what you need. And if you don't know what you need, I'll start naming stuff. And whatever I say that you think will work for you right now, we'll make it happen.
Or just sitting there. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. I
Yes.
I had someone and I lit 15 minutes straight. Just they just sat there with me and held my hand. Do you need more tissue? Here, let me snotty Kleenex. Let me get you some. Just sitting there.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. Just being a presence there for someone, or holding their hand or rubbing their back too.
Yes. Being human, human touch. It
Yes,
works. It
connection,
works.
connection.
It works. Ebony, you are doing all kinds of amazing things. You're having hard conversations. I'm so glad that we connected and we got the opportunity to have this conversation. I want to talk a little bit about hope, because you survived. And a lot of the patients I've had that are survivors have said they felt hopeless in that moment. Can we talk about the importance of hope? Because I think sometimes we think, oh, hope is just hope. But hope plays a huge part when we talk about suicide.
Yes. No, absolutely. I think, as you said, finding hope can be challenging, but I believe, I know it is necessary, and it is a game changer in navigating really hard, difficult things that we go through in life. And I think a lot of it is defining, what does hope look like for you? What does that mean for you? What does it feel, taste, touch, smell like for you? And so for me, hope is being here. Hope is being able to take the things that I've gone through in life, growing up, my parents being divorced, being physically abused, emotionally neglected, growing up in, poverty, dealing with low self-esteem, self-harm, you know, suicide, all these things, right? Um, Part of me defining hope and being able to bridge the gap between a lot of the really hard, dark things that I've gone through was believing this has to be for a reason.
Mm.
And wanting to use that and believing I was worthy of it. That was part of my finding hope for me because I didn't believe I was worthy. I believe that applied to everybody else, but it didn't apply to me.
Wow.
And so that process of healing and reconciling a lot of that and getting to a place of hope was believing that I was worthy of healing and that even though I went through all these things, I could still do the things. I could still be a good friend. I could still be a graduate student. I could still be a speaker, an aspiring speaker. I could still do this work. And it doesn't mean that I don't have my bad days.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that I still may not deal with some of the things that I've been dealing with. But because I do the work, like verbalizing when I need help, going to therapy, right? Doing these things to help put me in a better position to when I do struggle, it helps give me a better chance. And being able to help people know that it's okay not to be okay, that we, our community, our people, us, deal with these things. Because if we don't talk about it, we mentioned earlier, we don't give people permission to know that they're not alone and that there's a face to this, there's a name to this. And we may all go through different things, but there are commonalities and similarities that when we share our stories, when we're ready for that, and when we share them in the correct spaces at the correct times, it can bring about change, it can bring about healing, and it can inspire hope in other people. And to me, a combination of all of those things, it is what has helped me to find hope and encourages me to want to engage in this work to the capacity that I do because I just believe that when we have hope and when we can define what that looks like for us, it can really help us as we heal and navigate what does this life look like for us despite the things that we've gone through.
Oh, you said so many good things. I was sitting on top of my hands to make sure that I didn't interrupt.
So you can
you
release your
did.
hands now.
I can let them go. You
Yes, let them
described
go.
perfectly why we need therapy, why we need community, why we need people that love us and support us in our friend groups. You know, you hear as you're growing up or as you're maturing and moving through life, you hear certain things and you don't understand how valuable they are until you get to a place like this. You said friends that support. This is why you don't need toxic friends in your life. This is why you don't need fake friends in your life. Because when you get to a tough place, you're going to need someone who can hold you up and support you.
Yes,
I often have the conversation, people say, well, I don't need to go to therapy and pay whatever the rate is. I would say $150 an hour to someone. I can talk to my friend. Your friend is not equipped to give you the tools you need in your toolbox, because something else you said was what you need today may not be what you need
yes,
tomorrow. So you need a toolbox of things. I might need church and prayer today, but tonight I might need to call somebody who's in my circle that can hold me down. And so
Mm-hmm.
Monday, I may not need my friend, I may need my therapist, because I know my therapist is not going to judge me, but she's also going to see a deeper side of me and help me see some things that I don't even see about myself. So I think
Yes.
it's so important, as you described what hope is, that hope is not just a simple mama bought me a new iPhone. You talked about being seen. Sometimes I think in our society today, we believe things equal love. We believe things equal support. We believe things equal success. And things could never equate to any of those things. We have to pull back. When I saw children, which I no longer do therapy for children, thank you, Jesus. When I did therapy with children, one of the things I would say to parents is your child needs your time.
Yes.
They
They
need
need
your
you.
undivided attention, and they need you. They would rather make mud pies if you are fully present than they would going to the movies with friends or buying a new outfit at the mall. And I think that also holds true for adults, because so much is going on in the world right now.
Yes.
We need to be able to come home and be safe and be supported and be loved, because grown-ups struggle with
Yes.
thoughts of suicide. Also, I know we talked about the children, but adults struggle also, and it's a very real thing. Do you have some statistics? I know you shared some things earlier. Do you have any statistics that relate to African Americans about suicide?
Yes. So African Americans are one of the minoritized populations who have seen recent increase in deaths by suicide. Also, Black youth have seen increased rates of specifically females going to the emergency room due to suicide related injuries and things of that nature or attempts. And so there has been an increase in that as well. Our LGBTQIA plus youth are also shows at a higher risk of struggling with suicidal ideations and death
Pause,
by
Ebony.
suicide.
I need you to pause, Ebony. I can't sit on my hand right here.
Go ahead,
So,
let them loose. Let them
parents,
loose.
loved ones, as you are navigating, she said the LGBTQIA plus community, there's the suicide rate is ramping up. We don't have to understand anybody's journey, but we have to make sure people we love know that we love them in spite of whatever is going on. We don't want anybody in a dark room by themselves. So while you're caught up with sending them away because you don't understand, or whatever it is, be careful, because the rates are increasing. We need everybody to survive. We can work all the other stuff
Yes,
out, but we need you here. We need you safe, and we need you healthy.
yes, yes. No, absolutely. Just like you said, it's not about what you're going through or what you said earlier, or your ability to understand. Your role is just to offer support and just
Yes,
to be there to love.
yes, yes, yes. This is good. This is good. We are about 11 minutes out. I don't know where the time went, Ebony. I don't know where the time went. I want you to
I
tell me.
know. Yes, it went by so fast.
You mentioned QPR earlier, and I know that with QPR, you don't have to be a professional to use it. Can you talk to us a little bit
Correct.
more about QPR? Because there may be some listeners who are interested in knowing more, especially those. I know that most therapists, people think are comfortable with suicide, but that's not true. And when you're going to talk to teachers and school counselors, and let me say this, school counselors don't always equal a therapist. They are school
Yes.
counselors, okay? There's a difference there. Some school counselors are licensed therapists, but not all of them. Um, Not
Yes.
everybody is comfortable with having a conversation about suicide or have the knowledge base about suicide. But QPR is for anybody, correct?
Yes. Yes,
So
that is
tell me
correct.
about it.
Yes. So I want to start off with a story that's going to tie into that. So I think it may have been a year and a half ago in my foundation internship class. Our professor opened up class with a saying. He challenged us to look at self care through the lens of community care. That, like I said, that was about a year and a half ago, and ever since that class, that has stuck with me. And I believe that is appropriate in what I'm about to lead into with QPR because as we're talking about suicide prevention and awareness and mental health awareness, yes, there is a self care component to it as well, but we need each other and we need community. And we've discussed this throughout tonight and what that looks like. And so QPR is a free training that anyone can take. It doesn't, like Linda said, you don't have to be a therapist, a psychiatrist, psychologist. Anyone can take QPR. It's just like CPR. Anybody can take CPR and become certified in CPR. CPR is a life saving technique, a tool that you have in your toolbox in case you see somebody out who may be choking. You go through CPR, they teach you the Heimlich maneuver and the things, right? Until who gets there? The paramedics, right? And then they take them to the hospital and the doctors and they take it from there. It is the same concept, the same premise with QPR, which stands for question, persuade, refer. QPR is a training that basically just teaches people how to help somebody who is struggling, how to listen, look for, and identify, whether they're directly or indirectly, signs and cues to be able to help somebody who is struggling. And if that person is in a situation, if they're in a crisis where they are feeling suicidal, how you can get them to the professional to get the help that they need from there. And so that's what QPR is. And I've had the pleasure of being able to go into churches, businesses and schools to be able to teach QPR and what that looks like. It's about 45 minutes to an hour training. It can even be done virtually online, and you basically learn how to support somebody who is struggling, how to listen, how to identify things that they are going through. And once you have, and the training teaches you, identify that this person is in an active suicidal crisis, how to get that person to the professional to get them the help that they need.
That's good. That's good. Because as Ebony mentioned earlier, just because a person has a thought about suicide does not mean they are suicidal. Okay. And I'm not going to go into that because this is not the place for it. What I will tell you is there is a national crisis line. If
Yes,
you know of anyone who is suicidal or in a crisis, you can dial 988 and it will get you connected to someone who will be able to help you. Teach your children 988. They know 911, but 988 is a national number. It is a helpline, not for silliness like mama spanked me, but it is a national helpline for individuals who are suicidal or in crisis. Ebony, I just
yes.
want to
And
tell
there's
you,
also, I'm sorry, I want to say right quick for our LGBTQIA plus community, the Trevor Lifeline as well. is another resource that can be used for the LGBTQIA plus population if they're struggling as well. Same concept with 988 as well.
What was that number?
The Trevor Lifeline.
The Trevor Lifeline.
Yes, ma'am. Is
Okay.
also another contact or resource for the LGBTQIA plus community as well.
Okay. Good information. Ebony, I can't say thank you enough for opening your heart and letting us into your journey, and helping to educate us on your journey. I so appreciate you. I'm going to give you an opportunity to give a last word, whatever you might want to share with the listeners. They're giving thank yous in the chat box right now. I haven't talked much about the chat box because I was trying to get all this goodness in here tonight. But you've gotten all kinds of woohoos and ouch, done that before. We got some parents in here like, uh-oh, I need to do better in that area. You got some hearts. So the audience appreciates you and they're saying thank you so much for having this conversation. And I'll let you give us final words.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everyone who gave of your time to be here with Linda and I tonight. If you're a parent and you're looking for ways to support your child, if you made mistakes, that's okay. You know better, you do better. And that's all you can do is keep trying to do better. If you are someone who has struggled with suicidal ideations, if you are someone like myself who has survived an attempt, I want to just acknowledge you and I want to honor you and I want to say that I am so grateful that you are still here and that your life has meaning and that my hope, my prayer, my wish, my desire for you as you navigate what life looks like for you after that is to do it on your own terms, define healing on your own terms, define wellness on your own terms, whatever that looks like for you, and to continue to fight because you're worthy of it and that great and amazing things can come out of your life. And for those who are suicide loss survivors, for those that have lost a loved one because they died by suicide, I just want to honor you. And I just want to let you know that we thank you for being a presence to that person's life, but then also to know that even in your loss and grief, that you can still be a voice, you can still be able to advocate for that person's life and others to support them as a suicide attempt survivor, and to know that at the end of the day, we can do everything that we can to support someone who is struggling, but everybody has autonomy and so you just have to know that you've done everything you can and continue to support that person and continue to love them as best as you can. And then I will end on take care of yourself, take care of each other. Life is not always hard, is not always easy, but when we look at self care through the lens of community care and fight for our wellness, fight for love and compassion and community and give grace with each other, having those hard, difficult conversations, doing the work to be self aware is part of that too. As long as we continue to fight, as long as we continue to show up for each other, as long as we continue to create spaces and opportunities like this where we can admit it's okay not to be okay, we're going to get to a point to where hopefully we live in a world where people feel suicide is no longer an option. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ebony. Thank you, listening audience, for being here. I appreciate you. Until next time, be well and take care of you.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Elephant Room. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more powerful insights, down-to-earth conversations, and the courage to face whatever comes your way. This is where vulnerability meets strength and transformation gets real.